lists three things: a John Deere forklift to be surplused, Dodge Dakota pickup truck, and a portable rock wall, which is just that. It's one of the recreational type. All of these items are LISO items that we've gotten. They're now able to be moved out of inventory, deposit that cash into the capital account. You may recall that through the LISO program, anything that we sell goes into the capital account, and we identify those funds for future use for purchase of equipment for the police department. The list that you have, which was supplied by the police department, lists the Dodge Dakota twice. Listed as the second item on the list and the fourth item on the list. In fact, you only have three items to be considered for the resolution for surplus. But that'd be the pleasure of the Board of Commissioners to add that to the agenda. We hope that you will. The second thing I have for you for discussion tonight, you may recall that we recently signed a lease, a 10-year renewable lease for the vacant property across the street from City Hall between City Hall and First Bank. That lease has been executed. It's effective January 1, 2020. It runs through 10 years. We've already met with staff and made arrangements to have that property cleared. Once the lease is effective, again, January 21, we will start with the second week of January, removing all structures from that property and have it completely cleared, absent of mature trees. We'll also move forward with the slope. As you walk down toward the bank, there's kind of a steep slope that goes to that property. We're going to round that slope off, make it a little cleaner. We'll grass across it, and Public Works is looking to get bids or solicit bids to obtain a cost to extend the existing sidewalk from City Center Way down along City Center Boulevard to the bank, and that will give us access to the property. The fire department also, through its version of LISO, has secured some really nice picnic tables, park benches, garbage cans. They're out at Public Works now. We've gotten those back. Those are in stock. As soon as we clear the property and make it usable as a public space, we'll refinish those items, put those out on there, so we'll have kind of a community park, or a pocket park, so to speak, or at least a meeting area that you could go out and enjoy the outdoors. But we look forward to getting that property cleared, getting those items installed, and making that space usable. That was a really nice forward-thinking move by the BOC, and certainly one that will pay off. As a follow-up to that, we have discussed for some time the property next door to City Hall, to the south of City Hall, right next door to us. You may recall that last year, that property was listed for sale for $537,000. The same property owners own the property still. They have retained a real estate agent who met with me and the mayor a few days ago to discuss the city's interest in purchasing that property. We discussed back and forth some prices on the property. We have settled on preliminarily, and I say settled as I understand this is a BOC decision, not mine or the mayor's. The mayor understands that as well, but we settled on a discussed price of $425,000. We're in the process of obtaining an appraisal for the property. You can do that a couple of ways. One is a full-out appraisal. The second is what we discussed is a drive-by appraisal, where you're appraising the property in total, not necessarily any structures that are included there with it. Currently, the property owners lease the home to their son. They've asked that if we were to entertain a purchase of the property, that we would continue that lease for a period of 12 months. The lease, I have a copy of. The real estate agent sent me a copy of the lease today. I have that. We just got that a little while ago. They also have sent us, at our request, a purchase contract in the amount of $425,000. That is not for your approval tonight. That is for discussion matters tonight, obviously. And I'll need to get some feedback from the board on how you wish to proceed, if you wish to proceed at all. And the mayor can speak on this. I don't want to speak for him, but our discussions were that we know we're going to have to expand City Hall. The police department, which is directly under the building, is going to have to be rebuilt in some form and include a court facility. We know that they're not making or developing any other property next door to City Hall, so that just happens to be convenient for us. So as we go forward, you now know as much as we know about it. They will like to close relatively soon. They have also mentioned a lease purchase agreement if the city wanted to entertain a lease purchase agreement. They mentioned 3 years. We could do an outright financing. You could pay cash, although I wouldn't suggest doing that with our reserves, which we'll get to in just a minute. But in general terms, I think the mayor and I just need some feedback on kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down to move forward with consideration of that property as being purchased by the city. We don't see a downside to it. We think the property is going to appraise for about $375. When the property was listed for $537 a couple of years ago now, it appraised for just over $300. We think there's been some appreciation, but we need to get some idea to move forward with discussions with the real estate agent. So I'd be glad to provide you copies of this, although it is not official. It's just a cost price of $425. But just looking to try and get some feedback so I can follow up with the property owner and the realtor as far as interest in that. Commissioner Annie, we're talking about the property next door.
Really?
Yes. So
what's
the status on the property next door is we have an offer and discussion of $425,000. The real estate agent met with the mayor and me earlier this week. We arrived at that number based on their decision or their discussions where they were interested in $400,000 or thereabouts. We offered it $400,000, again, with the understanding that that offer is not binding. That is a discussion by us. It has to be ratified by the board, but we don't want the property to go to market if we can avoid it going to market. So there's a tenant. The property owner leases the home to their son right now. They've asked that the lease be extended for 1 year, basically calendar 2020, and they would entertain a purchase from the city after that. So just trying to get some feedback from the board as to kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down discussion or thought process as we can go forward in that negotiation. I believe yours is a yes.
Yes.
I believe the mayor is a yes.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about
Yes.
it now? Yeah.
Sure. Another thing to remember is we've talked about land adjacent to City Hall. Unless we move City Hall, this is our only opportunity. Yes, the mayor is a yes as well.
It just makes complete sense.
No, sir, it was perfect. I have a thumbs up from Commissioner Lucas. So I will email this agreement out to everyone. Obviously, Mr. Potter will need to work through this and make the offer officially. I understand there's no vote tonight. All of that has to take place as a formality, but I would like to be able to communicate back out to the property owner that in principle, there would be an agreed upon price of $425,000 pending ratification by the board. The second thing we need to do is consider how we finance or purchase that. When we get into the city's financials in just a minute, I'll talk about a couple of matters that we can address for that because we have some opportunities there. We also have some needs to talk through, but unless there's anything else.
So is that gonna be before the appraisal? Offer 425 before the appraisal's done?
Yes, sir. The discussion has been the 425, and they understand we have to work off an appraisal. So what the discussions we had with the property owner were that we would pay for the appraisal with no obligation to either party, but we wanted to move forward with that. I got the information from the appraiser today. We hope to have that done early next week. So once we get that back, before there's a formal vote or any expenditure of funds or contract execution, we will have the appraised value of the property back. So they're looking to move rather quickly. I know we're looking to move somewhat quickly, but we want to be cautious in that. So they understand that we have to work off the appraisal, and we'll do just that.
Did I understand correctly?
The discussion was that the sale would be completed and that the city would honor the lease as we would have to anyway, but the city would accept the lease as a part of the sale and it will continue for.
Next year, the city will
Yes, sir.
receive a rent.
Yes, sir. And the property currently leases for $940 a month. So effectively a little less than $12,000 over the term of the lease.
Would the city
Yes, sir. I have not seen anything in the lease that requires the tenant to be responsible for those maintenance items. So again, Mr. Potter would have to list all that specifically in a revised lease and purchase agreement. But in general terms, yes, sir, we will be responsible for that for 12 months. And thank you for that. We'll move forward with that, get that information to the Realtor, and hopefully get Mr. Potter some information as early as tomorrow. The next item I have for you, and this will take just a few minutes, but I want to go over where the city is financially. I've provided you with a list of documents. I want to make sure everyone understands where we are and how our budget process has worked to our favor. The first document you have, regular size document, is the city's existing bank balances absent of our reserve fund, which I'll get to in our other documents. But these are all of our bank balances effective yesterday. These are cash balances. I'll run down the list, but the general fund operating account has a balance yesterday of $561,786. We did run payroll today. That reduced that number by about $85,000, but we've not received our sales tax revenue yet, so we'll be back up on that for the month. So general fund operating, $586,000, or $561,786. The general fund holding account has a balance of $25,442. That holding account is for revenues that come in through direct deposit. That the general fund is at $561 plus the $25,000 is how we arrive at that. That's just general fund dollars that haven't been transferred into the general fund checking account. The park fund has a balance of $83,901. The tree bank fund has a balance of $101,268. The general fund sundry account has a balance of $20,456. The general fund sundry account are not taxpayer dollars. Those are pass-through dollars, such as if we receive monies and we hold them for a deposit for a street cut permit or some other thing. In years past, those dollars have been in the general fund. It's inflated the balance. We've removed any dollar that's not a city dollar and put in a segregated fund, so we understand those are not to be spent or utilized. The drug fund is a balance of $91,024. The general fund facilities account has a balance of $251,000. The state street aid has a balance of $268,827. The general fund capital account has a balance of $92,446. We did make the first lease purchase payment for the P25 public safety radio system. $133,000 did come out of that. We budgeted for that this year, so that expenditure was expected. So that's how we've arrived at the $98,000 or $92,446. The general fund Blue Cross Blue Shield adjusting account has a balance of $69,702. Those dollars are effectively general fund dollars, but we broke those out specifically for the use of our Blue Cross Health Insurance Fund. You may recall that we had some increased health insurance rates over the last year. We decided to go with a different system on our health insurance. That saved the city about $200,000 a year. To make sure that those funds are secure, we put all of the funds in the general fund Blue Cross Blue Shield adjusting account. The way that works is every 2 weeks when payroll is run, we take the employee's portion of health insurance and put it into that account. We take the city's match and put it into that account. We then pay any Blue Cross Blue Shield expenses out of that account. So we're understand that we're fully balanced in the Blue Cross account. We anticipate to end the year, and we'll get into the budget in just a moment, but we anticipate to end the year with a positive balance to the city of approximately $100,000 in that account. So that's good to our favor. You'll also notice at the top of this document, there's a loan balance of $388,818. That's for the fire truck that was financed through First Bank. We made the first payment on that, and that's standard loan document that we have on file for there. So I'll be glad to answer any questions on the cash deposits, but that's where we are on our cash deposits as of yesterday. If you prefer, we can post it on the website. Yes, ma'am. As opposed to not put it on the website. If you want it on there, we'll put it on there. I'm fine with that. We have redacted the specific identifying information. But yes, we can put that on there. As we get into the budget, I'll also tell you, we are running about $250,000 ahead of where we were last year, which is good. You may recall that we budgeted for very limited increase in revenue. We had some rounding that we did, but we budgeted for level funding for this year. So far, we're about 250 ahead, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Also, we budgeted for the reserve fund to be at 10% of the operating budget. We're at 10% and ahead of schedule on our reserve funding, and we'll discuss that just shortly. But these are our actual cash balances as of yesterday. The next item I have for you is, it's a front page only of the city's budget. Looks like this. It's a legal size document. And we really just need to go over the top two lines, or actually the top line on that. Commissioner Dawson may have two of those. You'll recall, as a part of our budgeting process, you do have a two-page. There's a second page. The reserve is on the second page. As a part of our budgeting process, you may recall that we have an overall budget, but we also budget by fund, so we can identify where every dollar goes, where it comes in, and where it goes as a part of revenue and expense. I've not printed off the entire budget document, but I have printed off the top portion of this. You may recall that the general fund operating account, we anticipated to start this year with $818,000 in the bank. We actually ended the year with $1,046,000 in the bank. All the other cash balances you see across the top are in line with where we thought we would be at the beginning of the year. So we started the year at a plus number of a little over $200,000, and that has grown to about $275,000 today. So cash position, we are ahead of schedule for what we've budgeted, and I'll go over the month-to-month cash balances in just a moment. The next page that you have is one line, and it highlights the general fund reserve account. You may recall that last year when we adopted the budget ordinance, we combined the reserve fund with a 2026 debt service fund. Our ordinance requires that we begin the year and end the year with a cash balance in reserve of 10% of our operating budget that cannot be included in operating. It must be segregated and separate from any other funds. The $586,000 reserve fund is in an LGIP fund, or local government investment pool fund, at the state of Tennessee. It is not in any bank account and cannot be commingled with any other fund. Those funds are separate and not a part of any budgeting for expenditure. So understanding that, you have a couple of complex documents before you, and I know Commissioner Rainey will tell you that I love a spreadsheet. They're not. I hid the cells. But you have two documents before you, two-page documents. One has a pink identifier at the top, the other has a yellow. The yellow document is our cash position for every fund for every month of the last fiscal year, the fiscal year that ended June 30, 2019. As you go down the list, you'll see that to the right, you have every ending balance highlighted. That's every ending cash balance in every checking account the city had through June 30 of 2019. And you will notice on the right-hand side at the top, a balance in the general fund operating account of the $1,046,000. You recall that we anticipated to have an ending year balance of $818,000. We actually had a year-ending balance in the operating account of $1,046,000. So we are moving forward on our operating. The next page you have is a continuation of that. It shows the highlighted balances for the reserve account at $317,000 and the 2025 fund at $263,930. Those have been combined, as you may recall, for our reserve fund, and we have all of the reserve fund in one account. So That's every month, that's every account, every dollar, every month that shows where we were in, where we're out, and what our beginning balance was on July 1, 2018 in every account, and our ending balance on July 1, 2019, June 30, beginning balance. So as we transition from that cash position into the new cash position, I'd ask you to look at the document with the pink highlight at the top. This is our cash position through October 31 of this year, and there are a couple of comparisons to be made. You'll notice I've highlighted the month of October. If you compare the October 2020 ending balance of $574,000 in the operating fund with the October ending balance last year, you'll notice that last year's ending balance was $295,266 in October, and this year's October ending balance was $574,968, a difference of nearly $300,000. That's where our cash position has stayed stable and improved slightly over the first 4 months of the fiscal year. So cash position, we're moving in the right direction, and we're moving in the right direction in primarily all of our accounts. The larger accounts, as you move down the list, third from the bottom, the state street aid has an ending balance this in October of $278,744. Last year, it was $276,469, so we're nearly identical on our largest accounts as we should be. Every other small account is listed within this fund, and it shows through October, and it shows that we are substantially ahead across the board in October. The next page shows the combined reserve account, and we have a reserve account balance as of October 31 of $585,454. That's a lot of information as it relates to our cash position, but the important part of that is to let you know that our cash position is ahead of where we were. Our anticipated reserve fund balance is ahead of schedule. We anticipated the reserve fund balance to end this year at $586,000. That fund is going to be $591,000 at the end of this year with interest alone. So this is our cash position. This is how we've budgeted. I'd be glad to answer any questions anyone has on any cash position, any cash account the city owns at all. But this is a comprehensive month-by-month review for the past 16 months for every account, for every bank, every cash account that the city has. Again, further ahead than where we thought we would be, which is positive for us. So, again, I'll be glad to answer any questions on those. If there are no questions on that, yes, this item will be posted on the city's website, so you'll know where we were as of 2 days ago. So, yes, we'll remove this column and make sure that it's hidden so there are no account identifiers at all. But we are ahead of schedule on that. So, knowing that, there are a couple of things that just need to be discussed. The first is, you may recall, we're working on a road conditions report, which gives us the condition or what it's going to cost to get our primary thoroughfares up to code and repaired to the extent that they need to be. Not widened because of the right-of-way cost, but we're talking about repairs for Chester Road, Old Nashville Road, Crowcut, Northwest Highway, and Horn Tavern, in addition to replacement of the bridge at Horn Tavern and replacement of the culverts and all of those roads. We are up in our revenues. We are ahead in our cash position. I would be cautious with that because we do have the $133,000 payment for the lease purchase on the communications equipment due again in August of next year. So what I would do with the surplus that we have now is transition those dollars over to capital so we understand that we can fund that with that capital fund next year. That was the purpose of budgeting the way we did, was to realize those additional funds, secure those, and make sure we could cover that debt. So we've exceeded that goal by about $25,000. I would suggest moving those dollars over the capital account. That way, the capital expenditure for fiscal year 2020 is taken care of today, actually be taken care of tomorrow. The second thing that will need to be considered is the bond issue that has been discussed as a part of going forward on some of the road conditions. We have two items that really need to be considered. The first is the road conditions. We've done a preliminary report on that, and we believe that that number is going to come back somewhere around $10 million. I know I had the same kind of air out of the balloon, but as we've all discussed, we're not going to be able to do those appropriately $50,000 or $100,000 at a time. We're going to have to take a swing at it, and there's really no other way. That work is unpleasant. It's something that the money will be spent on. A month later, no one's going to know it's there, but you'll still have the debt. The reality is those roads have to be worked on. The second consideration has been a partnership with the Water Authority of Dixon County to consider sewer infrastructure improvements on the Highway 100 corridor so that we can extend sewer or sewer service to the 840-100 intersection, which would be commercial development. We anticipate that that number is going to be about $3 million simply because of the topography. You have uphill and downhill that gets us out to 840, which means you're going to have a series of lift stations and gravity flow up and down the hill, or the hills. That's just the nature of how sewer works. So within that, if we're talking 8 to 10 million on roads, or we're talking 3 million on sewer, life of that, how are we going to pay for that and not overextend ourselves? You may recall that in 2015, the Williamson County property tax or property reevaluations were done. They'll be done again in 2020. When those were done in 2015, there was a 13% increase, 12.5% increase, rounded up to 13%, that if the city had not reduced its property tax by that amount, that would have been a net to the city of roughly $245,000 a year. Over the last 5 years, it would have been about $1.2 million in cash that we would have taken in. The city's property tax rate was reduced from $1 to 87 cents to compensate for that. We lost out on that cash. Looking forward in 2020, if the property tax valuations or mirror 2015 at the 13%, and there's some discussion that they will be higher than that. But if 2020 mirrors 2015, that will be a net to the city of the $245,000 that the city won't have to do anything for. That's not a budgetary impact, as we know, for our budget and cash position today. So what I would like to do, and again, this is going to need some discussion, but what I would like to do is prepare for the city an amortization on a 20-year and 30-year, looking at the current market rates for the bond issues, considering that $245,000 being the debt service payment. If that $245,000 comes in, it's new money to the city. You know you need to do that, rather than try and go forward with a debt service or a debt issuance that the city may not be able to stomach. If we can reverse engineer ourselves back into a debt payment that we can stomach and look at the cash value, that will give us a capital plan going forward. I'll be glad to entertain however you would like to see that, but the bond market's going to be pretty favorable in the second quarter of calendar 2020 and the third quarter of calendar 2020. So if it's going to be discussed, now will be the time to figure out your preference for that. So just kind of some thinking out loud for what you would like to see as a part of that, or not like to see as a part of that.
Talking specifically about that.
Yes, sir.
And
I think we need to have an in-depth discussion with Water Authority of Dixon, for sure. They are partners in that. There's also some discussion about if there are impact or assessment fees on the sewer, could those be considered as a part of that discussion? But what I don't want to do either with us or with Dixon Water is overextend the city's ability to pay that debt service. So if we were to go back and do that right now, you're easily looking at that number, probably $8 million, depending on the length of time that you want to put that out there. And we can do a couple of different things. You may recall that the city currently has a debt service payment of roughly $250,000 for the 2014 bond issue. If the city's interest was to not increase the debt service payment over the life or in the short term, the next 4 to 5 years, actually 7 years until that pays off, you can do a wraparound financing so that your current debt issue would be brought in a little bit. You may need to increase the payment just a little, and you would make interest-only payments on the new debt until the existing debt is paid off, and then you would pick up with the new debt in year 7 or 8, but your debt service payment would be levelized over that length of time. That's fairly common if you're trying to make sure you don't have the roller coaster of up and down debt service years. So there are a couple of ways to look at doing that, but I want to make sure the board is comfortable with discussing rather quickly some bond issue opportunity, because I'll need to get that drafted pretty quickly, or at least the amortization for it pretty quickly. I think the 3 million needs to be part of the discussion. Right? Yes, sir. I can certainly draft it that way. I can also draft it in such a way where the life of a lift station, a sewer lift station, is going to be 10 to 15 years. I don't know that we want to get into a 20 or 30-year amortization on a 15-year service life of an item. So to your point, what I likely do, we'll go back and figure out a wraparound financing scenario where the capital infrastructure, the financing of the capital infrastructure does not exceed the life of that item. And then if you look forward going out there, if it has a 15-year life, then the city would be in a position in 15 years if it needed to go out and issue additional debt, or if it had considered interest as a part of that, and I'm sorry, depreciation, if you fund the depreciation of that item going forward, then when you get to the useful life end of that, then you could have cash to set that aside. So there are a ton of different ways to look at it, but I want to make sure that you as a board are comfortable with having that discussion, because I think once we engage in this tonight and engage in it with Dixon Water, there's going to be an expectation that, yeah, that's a big word. There's going to be an expectation that we're sincere in going forward with that. So, again, your preference, but. Yes. The amended budget for the year will be presented to you on December 19. Prior to the amended budget being presented to you, I will have the amortization schedule and the proposed values for that to you in advance. So there will be no surprise as we look at that number.
In that road work.
Yes, sir. I'll ask Kevin to provide that as well. We did get Old Nashville Road back, and I'm sorry, Old Franklin Road, and it was $2 million roughly for that. So if you really look at the road construction of it, in general terms, you're looking at about $1 million a mile. So if you put that into perspective, you're looking 3 to 3.5 for Chester Road, given the length of Chester Road. All of those are going to have to be rebuilt. There's no real road base to them. They were not built to design standard. So as you look at that, the length of the road is going to dictate that and put that number out there. So if you consider $1 million a mile for those roads plus the sewer investment, then we'll be at a number that we can stomach, and I'll get that to you. So, and I know this is a lot, but obviously some things have changed, and I need to get that out to you as quickly as I can. As a part of that, we need to consider how the board wants to move forward with the city manager selection process. The advertisement for the position is out. I've advertised it on the city's website. I've advertised it on Tennessee City Managers Association, and I've advertised it through MTAST. All those advertisements are done. The position closes on Tuesday, December 17th at 4 p.m. The advertisement is drafted such that all of those resumes will come to me. once, just for a matter of collecting them, once you decide tonight on what committee, what process, how we go forward with that, I will meet with that committee on Thursday, the 19th, prior to the board meeting, and provide all of the applications and resume we have so we can move forward with some manner of decision on that. So I really just need some feedback from each of you on how you prefer to do that, from a committee, board selection, whatever that process is. Right? They got lucky.
I think it's important. I think it's important.
What? Sure. What I would do would be collect them all. Whatever the citizens committee is or that group, I will email, as soon as we close business on the 17th, I will get all of those resumes out to all the committee members, and we'll follow up with that meeting on the 19th. Give everybody a couple days to look over those, vet those, see what those are, and then present something back to the Board of Commissioners on the 21st or the 19th that night. I believe you're out on the 19th. So I'll need to get that information out to the mayor at the same time as all of you, but he won't be here for the meeting that night, so we'll move forward and get that information out. So I just need a consideration of names, and I'll take care of contact information and move forward as you see fit. Totally up to you. Okay. So that's Scott McCoy. One nomination for Scott Collins. That is a risk. Okay. I will communicate this out to him and make sure he gets that. But as soon as I get those names, I will notify you of what all those names are, get the contact information for all of them, get that out, make sure they're on board, because the meeting on the 19th will be pretty important to vet those and understand what we have or what we don't have. The second part of this discussion will need to be what's done in the interim. As a part, I don't think you're aware, but we have two aldermen from Nolensville here tonight as guests for us, so they're all a part of this. They are unbelievably polite through the whole process, and I'll leave it at that. It's everybody knows this has been a decision. So with that, we'll need to consider an interim. There's no way that this position is going to be filled by January 6th. So as a part of just process and procedure, the ability to sign off on payroll, to follow up on day-to-day operations, things that need to be done, that could likely be done by committee, but there's going to have to be a person to at least be able to follow up with that on a part-time basis somehow, some way. So we've all discussed a whole series of opportunities for that, but just some guidance from all of you on how you want to proceed on that would be helpful, because the calendar is not our friend right now. Totally up to you.
Just looking at in the past.
I think if we're lucky, we'll be looking at the end of February, 1st of March. Let's assume that we get a pool of good candidates. The interview process is going to lead us obviously into January, probably mid-January, depending on scheduling. If we have a committee and then we have BOC interviews, that's going to take some time. You put notice in, that's going to take a little bit of time. So the quickest I see this happening is going to be likely into February, 1st of March. So that's going to leave, let's call it 60 to 90 days of a window where something needs to minimally take place so the basics can be accomplished.
Suggestions of what Okay, I'm so sorry, you go ahead. Go ahead.
For those of you who can't see this, I'm getting darted up here pretty bad. You should,
So what are our legal options? Can we?
checks to be signed, payroll, any administrative, if you have a personnel matter that comes up, the charter is very specific, that's handled by the city manager, whoever that is. So you're gonna have personnel, checks to be signed, payroll, and then any day-to-day operations that come up. We have a series of retail development, commercial developments that are coming up that's gonna take some attention to. So, sure, sure. I don't mind doing that. We're,
In a position where you can't?
we're not moving until summer, just because kids in school and all that does that. So I'm passing by here twice a day, every day, morning and evening. So I don't mind assisting with that. However, you would have or not have me do that. That's totally up to you, but I don't mind at all that process.
That sounds like that would be my recommendation.
Totally up to
That would be my recommendation. Right in the morning and afternoon. That you would be.
The other option would be, Mayor Blake.
sure.
On an interim basis.
The-
Day-to-day
He-
operational expenses.
He could do the check signing would be a little, other things would not be problematic. Check signing would because the bank, First Bank is our bank. So if I were to do that and change the signature authority, right now, Brandy Johnson is authorized signer, Commissioner Rainey is an authorized signer. So it would need to be someone local, just for the purpose of clarity. I would not do the mayor, but any other elected officials that you, I'm not
You
suggesting.
mentioned that, and I thought about that some, but if it's ministerial. Really, I like to be independent in
Okay.
the way that I could find. I want to
Anyone that the board votes.
Are we going to lose taking these responsibilities?
city managers authority.
You wouldn't have to do that.
So
Will help. I couldn't be comfortable doing that at all. There's,
would you pay her?
I mean, for what we're talking about, you could do it in a few hours a week. It's not going to be, I mean, if we're talking about a year, then obviously there's a replacement that needs to come in. If you're talking about a couple of hours a week, just to kind of keep things afloat until someone's here, that's not difficult. So,
Maybe an hourly.
how about if this is what the discussion is, how about I get something with, yeah. How about I get something to Tim? It's just a generic boilerplate, small something that the board could consider. And do just kind of a get us by until we get something done. I'm comfortable with that. If the board's comfortable with that. That's a simple document, something to do, and that can be. January 3rd. Yeah, at the most, I would think 12. Once you get beyond that, then a full-time interim, so to speak, is going to need to be there because it's going to get busy. You're going to have budget time. There's a ton of economic development project or just several big-ticket items that are on the table right now. And
I know that the city would do,
well, sure. Okay. I'll get Mr.
and I think the city
I'll get with Mr. Potter on that. We'll put something simple together, get that back out to everyone and just get that done. And for what it's worth, thank you very much just for the confidence in doing that. I think everyone understands this is a team, everyone's kind of built this place for the last couple of years, and the opportunity to be considered in transition is pretty exceptional.
you've got a city manager that is getting notice. Cut him off and let him sign checks or have access to things. And I find that's just kind of not right here. You're leaving us on very good terms. You're leaving the city of Fairview on very good terms. We are very happy with the work that you've done, and it's that would be analogous to a situation where you were leaving on bad terms. If somebody had been not doing a good job or been suspected of not doing something good, it's typically routine for people in executive positions at companies to leave, but to remain in some type of consulting role during a transition phase, and that's more of the situation we've got here that I would think. So I think that I'll get with Scott and we'll get something prepared that the commission can look at and review and approve. And I can talk about what you think's a fair compensation rate and I like what Commissioner Dawson is saying. Approximately how many hours would you anticipate working per day? And we can figure out some way to compensate you for that for a month or two.
We'll put that together and get that, and it'll be very simplistic in nature, and we'll move forward. And hopefully we get somebody hired like soon. We've already had a couple of inquiries about it, so maybe the market's right for us. We'll see. So next time,
And it's on that same topic.
Sure.
Ms. Johnson said, she and I were talking about how things come up on a daily basis, and if you're not here, I've told her that she certainly can call me we're gonna have to sort of do this by committee, but she can call me and problems one at a time. And I'll probably be calling Mayor Blade some too, so.
Sure. And thank you guys very much. Obviously, you know that. Yes, I understand you're still mad at me. I've been sweating up here. It is very difficult to have like, yeah, that's okay. No, sir, I will not forget it. I'm afraid of what that T-shirt's going to say. All right, last thing, and this is not something that has to be just considered tonight, but it needs to be considered soon. Fairview's in a unique situation in that the election next year is going to have 4 seats up. The mayor's seat is up in 2022. The the commission seats are up in 2020. In fact, there are 2 races, excuse me, there are 2 races that are up. The first is the seat that Commissioner Dawson is in, formerly Commissioner Crutcher's or Judge Crutcher's seat. And that seat was designed at the last election to be a 2-year term. So that election comes up this summer, or this coming year, and it's 1 seat out here by itself. The other 3 seats are also up, excuse me, the other 3 seats are also up with the top 3 highest vote getters being awarded seats. The top 2 vote getters will receive a 4-year term, and the 3rd highest vote getter receives a 2-year term. The reason that is the purpose was to cycle through the election process so you didn't have a single person having to run to get the most votes, but 2 commission seats where the top 2 vote getters were elected. So to balance that out and have the mayor's seat there. So that's our election cycle going into the coming year. We also have 2 other elections that are taking place. That is the judge's seat. That seat's up this year because when Judge Crutcher took that seat was only for the term through the next municipal election, which is this summer. We also have the election of the municipal court clerk. As you're aware, we've had the conversation to where we have general sessions court, we have to have a general sessions or an elected general sessions court clerk. So we're at a crossroads with all of these elections. That election, the judge and clerk election takes place in August. The municipal elections, general, take place in November. The reason I tell you all this is there are a couple things that need to be considered. And that's one specifically is employee benefits for the court clerk. The court clerk currently is a city employee. They're eligible for state retirement, vacation leave, sick leave, or ABEL as we call it. Everything that comes with standard employment. But the clerk as we have today is managed by the city manager. They're a city employee, as any other city employee is, and they're managed by the city manager. Once that position is elected, then there is no oversight of the city manager. They are a full-time elected position of their own office where they're not under the oversight of the city manager, just like a judge or member of the Board of Commissioners. So with that, there are some things that have come into play as it relates to benefits. Specifically, their eligibility for benefits and how we would manage vacation leave. If you have an elected position that's full-time, that elected position is not going to go to the city manager and request time off because they can come and go as they please. That's the nature of being an elected official full-time. So that will be challenge number 1 is how we address that. I've talked with Gina to make sure she understands that once that position is filled, it will not be, if she wins, it will not be employment as she understands it. It will be an elected position, not a city employment position. So matters such as vacation leave will no longer apply because it will be up to the taxpayers or some other governing board to determine whether or not she's at work or whoever is at work to perform their task. The second part of that is employee benefits generally, specifically health insurance and retirement. Unlike other positions, if this is going to be a full-time municipal court clerk position, then they're not going to be able to go to the marketplace for health insurance, or not going to be able to go to the marketplace for retirement, so to speak, because 100% of their time is going to be dedicated to the operation of the court clerk. So in furtherance of that, we're going to need to consider an ordinance that codifies the benefits of the elected court clerk, so that going forward, because forever is a long time, going forward, everyone understands what those benefits are for the elected court clerk as a full-time court clerk, and how that functions as a part of relationships within the city. Which brings us to what we discussed for the last couple of years, which is the elected official health insurance. Not debating where we are in that process. That's not the point of the discussion. The part of the discussion is, if we're going to codify benefits for an elected position being a full-time elected position, then I think we also need to codify as a part of that ordinance benefits for part-time and all other elected positions. While we're moving forward with establishing that ordinance and what those benefits are, I think it would be helpful for the city to identify all of those in one document. It just makes sense to do. So currently, as it exists, there are elected officials on city health insurance, elected officials not on health insurance. That includes the judge. The discussions internally as it relates back to the court clerk, and there's a reason why I'm having this conversation kind of circular, but the discussions for the full-time elected position were, do you allow the full-time elected position to participate in the health insurance plan as it exists, where the city pays a portion and the employee pays a portion, or do you establish the salary such that the elected official pays the full share of the health insurance, so it's not a perceived benefit as a part of that elected position? In other words, you get a salary, and as of that salary, you're eligible to participate in those benefits, this being health insurance, and you can pay the full rate for that, but that's elected by the elected position. They can choose to do that or not. Currently, if someone's on family health insurance, the total cost is about $850 a month to the city, closer to $900. The city's portion is about $650. The employee portion is about $250. The salary currently for the elected officials, the mayor and commissioners, is not at that rate. Right now it's at $450. So there's no way for an elected official who's the mayor or a commissioner to fully pay to participate in that plan if you're going to offer health insurance at the cost rate for that, which is perfectly fine. And I'm not pitching one way or the other which way you should go. But while the discussion of the ordinance comes up for the salary for the court clerk, I think there needs to be some discussion about salary for the mayor and commissioners as well, such that if their salary would be where, if they wanted to participate in the health insurance plan, they could simply choose to do so. As a part of that, they could pay that cost and participate in the health plan. If they chose not to participate for whatever reason, then they would just retain their salary as a part of their part-time benefit. So under the law, and I have copies of this, but under the law, there are a couple of things that need to be considered, and this is why this is important. The cap on city commissioner salary is $950 a month. I have a copy of that in the charter. The cap for compensation for the mayor is $1,000 a month. Right now, it's all $450. There is also, I'm highlighting that for you. I apologize, I should have sent that out. There's also a provision in here such that the elected officials cannot vote themselves in a raise or change compensation during their term of office. Given that all 4 BOC seats will be eligible for election or reelection this year, then this would be the year to consider if there's going to be a change in the compensation of elected officials for the commissioners, not the mayor, simply because this will be the only time going forward that all 4 city commission seats will be up at the same time. So rather than trying to cycle this in, so let's say you adjust the compensation and it's $900 a month, I'm just saying, you pick the number. Under the old system, 2 people would have been eligible for the raise after the election, but 2 people would have been midterm, so they would not be eligible to the expiration of that term. So you'd have staggered salaries and staggered benefits. Given that we have all 4 commission seats up this year, if there's going to be an opportunity to address that equitably for all 4 city commission seats, this is the calendar year to consider that, because no member of the BOC is going to be voting for themselves a raise. Their seat is going to be up and they'll have to run for that. The only outlier for that is the mayor's seat, such that there would not be able to be a vote to increase the mayor's salary until the expiration of the current term. So assuming that the discussion is to increase the salary from $450 to $900 and then give all the elected officials the ability to participate in the health insurance, if that were to pass, then the $900 a month rate would be effective in January of 2021, after the election and after those members are sworn in. And then that salary would be eligible to the mayor in January of 2023, after that election, so that there's no increase in the salary for the mayor for that term. I understand it's a bit complicated, but again, this is the only time we're going to have 4 seats up, and this is the only time we're going to have to consider a full-time elected position at the city as a new position at the city. So in consideration of all of that, I think it's prudent to have a discussion on how that compensation is done and what do we do ordinance-wise to address it. And I know that's a whole lot. We only have a few minutes, but all these things are important to get right. And again, the calendar's not our friend. So thoughts, ideas, input, none, I'm comfortable with. I just need some direction. So as you go forward, just consider it, but with the election cycle being the way that it is this year, it just makes sense to address that while you can, because you're not gonna have a chance for all of the seats to be up at once except for the mayor.
So when do we
If you take action on this at all, I would encourage you to do it no later than January. I think you want to have that done over with well in advance of the election, make sure that all that's clear, make sure everyone understands that all the seats are up. I would encourage the mayor simply to abstain from that vote if it comes to a vote. That way there's no consideration whatsoever, given the fact that even though it wouldn't be effective until the end of his term, he'd still be seated during the implementation of the change that would take place in January 2021. I'll get you the information out. I know we've shared this before, but the total information for employee health insurance cost, so that everyone can see what that is. If you go that way, to the city, there's no net difference, okay? If an elected or anyone's on health insurance, the city's paying that cost no matter what. So there's no fiscal change or impact on the city other than if there were elected officials who were not on the health insurance, but the total dollar amount for the program is minuscule. Procedurally, it cleans up the matter as we elect the full-time position and consider re-election of the judge. The other part of that I will consider is Currently, the judge salary is $16,200. There's been some discussion about going to 3 days a month in court. As we have that discussion, it would be helpful to consider codifying the salary for the judge as well, in consideration of if that expands to 2, 3, or 4 days as a part of that term. That's an 8-year term, and I don't think you want to leave that to political instability over the course of that, because a lot can change during that time. So with that, I know that's a lot. There's a ton of work going on. I appreciate y'all's help with all of this. If I can answer any question at all on any of this, please let me know. We'll follow up. And immediately following the business meeting, we have an executive session, which will likely take about 15 minutes, maybe less, Commissioner Rainey. Not 20, 15, maybe 10. It's up to Mr. Potter. But there'll be no action to take place after that. So we will adjourn to the executive session, come back into, or dismiss to the executive session, come back in and adjourn the regular business meeting, but you'll have no items to be considered as you move forward in that. So with that, I think we have about 3 minutes until we start the regular meeting. And thank you.